I never thought 6 words could destroy a version of myself I had spent 11 years building. But that's exactly what happened on a Saturday evening in front of 40 people who will probably remember it longer than I will ever forget it. My name is Claire, and I used to believe that being right was the same thing as being kind. I found out how wrong I was at my sister's engagement party, standing in a rented backyard strung with fairy lights. Holding a glass of wine I would end up not finishing. My husband Daniel had just stood up to give a toast. He wasn't a natural public speaker. His hands always found his pockets, his voice always started a half step too quiet. And that night was no different. He fumbled the opening line, mixed up my sister's fiance's name with her ex from college, and the crowd gave that awkward little laugh people give when they're being polite. I didn't give a polite laugh. I laughed loud, sharp, the kind of laugh that cuts through a room and makes people turn their heads to find where it came from. And then, because apparently that wasn't enough, I said it. "Oh my God, Daniel, please sit down before you embarrass yourself further," loud enough for every table to hear. The yard went quiet in that specific way a room goes quiet when everyone suddenly finds their napkin fascinating. My sister's face went pale. My mother's eyes found mine with a warning I chose to ignore. And Daniel just stood there for a second, looking at me the way you'd look at someone you were meeting for the first time. Then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. Not a hurt smile, not a sarcastic one. A calm, almost peaceful smile, like a man setting down a heavy bag he'd been carrying for a long time. He finished his toast in 4 sentences, raised his glass, and sat back down next to me like nothing had happened. I remember feeling relieved, actually. I remember thinking, good, he's not going to make a scene. I had no idea that not making a scene was going to be so much worse than anything he could have said in that moment. The car ride home was silent, not angry silent. I know angry silent. I'd lived through plenty of that in our marriage. This was different. This was the silence of someone who had already left the room in his head. I tried small talk about the shrimp being undercooked. He answered in one word. I tried apologizing. Sort of, the way I always did. "I didn't mean it like that. You know I love you." And he just nodded and looked out the window like he was watching the streetlights count down to something. When we got home, he didn't yell. He didn't bring up the 11 years, or the time I'd done something similar at his cousin's wedding, or the dozens of small moments I'd conveniently erased from my own memory where I'd corrected him, cut him off, made him smaller in front of people so I could feel bigger. He just walked into the bedroom, pulled a suitcase down from the closet, and started folding his shirts with a kind of careful, deliberate calm that scared me more than shouting ever could have. I stood in the doorway and asked him what he was doing, my voice cracking in a way I hated. He didn't stop folding. He didn't even look up right away. And when he finally did, when he finally spoke, it wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel, it was almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. He said, "I laughed too, just not tonight." 6 words. I stood there trying to make sense of them while he zipped the suitcase closed. He explained it to me slowly, like he'd rehearsed it in his head 100 times, waiting for the right moment, or maybe the wrong moment, or maybe he'd simply run out of moments to wait for. He told me that for years he had laughed along too. Laughed at my jokes about his job, laughed at the way I mimicked his stutter when he was nervous, laughed because laughing felt safer than admitting how much it cost him every time. He said he used to tell himself I didn't mean it, that it was just my sense of humor, that marriages were built on rough edges, and his job was to sand them down quietly so we could stay smooth on the surface. But somewhere along the way, he said, he stopped believing his own excuse. Tonight wasn't the moment I broke something. Tonight was just the moment I finally saw what had already been broken for a long time. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of our bed replaying every dinner party, every family gathering, every casual joke I'd made at his expense that I'd filed away as harmless. I thought about the way he used to laugh a beat too late at his own embarrassment, like he was buying himself time to recover before anyone noticed. I thought about how many times harmless was just a word I used so I wouldn't have to call it what it actually was. He didn't come back the next day, or the one after. He stayed at his brother's place while I sat in our too-quiet house rehearsing apologies that all sounded hollow even to me. Because an apology that only shows up after the other person leaves isn't really an apology. It's a negotiation. It took me 3 weeks to understand that what I owed him wasn't a better apology. It was a different person to give it. I went to therapy for the first time in my life. Not because he asked me to, but because I couldn't stand one more day of being someone whose default setting was to make herself feel bigger by making the person she loved feel small. It took months before he was willing to sit across from me again, and even longer before either of us trusted that the sitting meant something. We're still married. I won't pretend it's the same marriage it used to be because it isn't. And honestly, I'm grateful for that. The old one wasn't something worth saving in the shape it was in. Sometimes people ask me what changed everything, expecting some dramatic betrayal or a secret I uncovered. I tell them the truth. It was 6 words, said quietly, by a man folding his shirts in our bedroom, who had finally run out of reasons to laugh along.